Mr. President, on Tuesday, I came here to the floor to talk about one issue that we are rarely divided on in this building, and that is our duty to keep the promise we've made to provide not only care, but opportunity to all those who have honorably served in our nation's armed forces. The comprehensive veterans legislation that is now before us is really the test for many members of Congress. Can we all put politics aside for the good of our nation's veterans to keep that promise? Can we show these heroes that despite our differences, we will work as diligently towards getting them the benefits and care they've earned as they have worked for our nation? Mr. President, now, unfortunately, some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are indicating that they would now prefer to put politics over promises under the guise of an alternative to this bill. Mr. President, given what we have seen recently on other bills, supported, by the way, by a majority of Americans, we shouldn't be surprised. But I truly did think and hope that this bill would be a different story because it contains ideas from both Democrats and Republicans. And because this is an issue that has historically united this body, and because we have all pledged to do whatever it takes on behalf of our veterans. But once again, where we are today is some of our colleagues have decided to use unrelated issues to sour this entire effort for our veterans and their families who stand to benefit the most from this comprehensive legislation that we're offering. And with their alternative bill, they have now proposed to strip away life-changing programs for veterans who are looking to take the skills that they learned on the battlefield to the boardrooms. They have, with this alternative, decided to halt the expansion of opportunities for our caregivers who are integral to the health and well-being of some of our most vulnerable heroes. But among these and many other examples of the Republican effort to derail this landmark legislation, there is one issue that I find most egregious, and that is their shameful opposition to provide our catastrophically wounded heroes with access to reproductive services that they so desperately need to start a family. Mr. President, this shouldn't be a political issue. This is about giving veterans who have sacrificed everything, every option we have to help them fulfill a simple dream of starting a family. Now, as we all know, our men and women in uniform have become increasingly susceptible to reproductive, spinal, and traumatic brain injuries due to the changing weapons of war. But as we know, thanks to modern medicine, many of these service members are being kept alive and they're returning home. In fact, as of the new year, there are 2,348 service members who are living with reproductive, urinary, or pelvic injuries as a result of this war. And like so many of our veterans, these men and women come home and want to return to their lives. They want to find employment. And importantly, they want to start a family. Yet what they find when they go to our VA is that the fertility services that are available don't meet their extremely complex needs. In fact, veterans who suffer from these injuries find that the VA is specifically barred from providing more advanced assisted reproductive techniques like IVF. They are told, despite the fact that they have made such an extreme sacrifice for all of us, we cannot provide them with the medical services that they need simply to start a family. Now, these are veterans like Staff Sergeant Matt Kyle and his wife Tracy. Despite returning home from Iraq as a quadriplegic, Staff Sergeant Kyle and Tracy started talking about and exploring the possibility of starting a family together. But because his injuries prevented him from having children naturally, Tracy turned to the VA and began to explore her options for fertility treatments. But because of that VA ban, they were told no and turned away. So they were out of options, and the Kyles decided that this was important enough to them that they were willing to pay out of their own pocket, for IVF treatment in the private sector to the tune of $32,000 per round of treatment. Well, Mr. President, thankfully, Staff Sergeant Kyle and Tracy welcomed twins, Matthew and Faith, into the world after just one round of treatment. And Tracy told me after that, and I want to quote it to all of you, "The day we had our children, something changed in both of us. This is exactly what we had always wanted. Our dreams had arrived. The VA, Congress, and the American people have said countless times that they want to do everything they can to support my husband or make him feel whole again. And this is your chance. Having a family is exactly what we needed to feel whole again. Please help us make these changes so that other families can share this experience," end quote. Mr. President, Tracy and Matt aren't alone. There are many men and women out there who share this common thread of a desperate desire to fulfill their dream of starting a family, only to find that the catastrophic wounds they sustained while defending our country are now preventing them from seeing that dream through. It shouldn't be that way. Now, unfortunately, Republicans are indicating they will not join us today in overturning this absurd and antiquated ban. Apparently, they would rather our nation's heroes spend tens of thousands of dollars of their own money in the private sector to get the advanced reproductive treatments they need just to start a family. They don't see the problem in letting our veterans' marriages dissolve because of the stress of infertility, in combination, of course, with the stress of readjusting to life after such a severe injury, driving relationships to a breaking point. Mr. President, any service member who sustains this type of extremely serious injury deserves a lot more. Because, you know, we came very close, actually, to making this bill a reality in the last Congress. In fact, Tracy Kyle, who I just talked about, watched from the gallery here when we unanimously passed this legislation. Unanimously. But here I am today, once again, imploring Republicans to stand up and explain to our men and women in uniform, who I know are paying very close attention to this debate, and explain to them why they now want to turn their back on the catastrophic reproductive wounds that have become a signature of these wars. Just yesterday, I spoke to a crowded room of heroes from disabled American veterans and told them the heartbreaking story of the Kyle family that I just shared and why this legislation is so important. And if their cheers and applause are any indication, I'd say they wholeheartedly agree that our women veterans deserve this, our male veterans deserve this, and certainly our military families deserve this. So, Mr. President, I'm here on the floor today to ask my colleagues a simple question. Are you willing to tell those brave men and women that didn't ask questions when they were put in harm's way that you're going to let politics get in the way of our commitment to them? The catastrophic wounds that we have seen from injuries in Iraq and Afghanistan have meant that our veterans' dreams to start a family have been put on hold because of the tremendous cost of IVF services. We believe that is a cost of war. And we believe that the VA absolutely should cover, and it's unacceptable to let unrelated issues stand in the way. Mr. President, even the major veteran service organizations and their leaders have said to us that issues like the Iran sanctions that the other side wants to offer have no place in this comprehensive veterans legislation. People like American Legion Commander Daniel Dellinger, who said, and I quote, "Iran is a serious issue that Congress needs to address, but it cannot be tied to S. 1982, which is extremely important as our nation prepares to welcome millions of U.S. military servicemen and women from war." Or IVA founder and CEO Paul Rykoff, who called this comprehensive legislation, and I quote, "a game changer that will change the trajectory for millions of veterans for decades to come," unquote. As serious and as timely as they may be, unrelated issues like Iran sanctions are just calculated attempts to intentionally dismantle our bipartisan effort to expand health care, education opportunities, employment, and benefits for our nation's heroes. We can't allow our commitment to them to lapse or to get caught up in separate issues or political grandstanding. So, Mr. President, I want to thank the senator from Vermont and all of his staff for their tireless work on this comprehensive legislation that they've brought to the floor. And I really hope that our colleagues will reconsider opposing this common sense and important step to give those who have sacrificed everything the reproductive treatments that they need to start a family. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.